All right, good morning, everyone. We are back. For those of you who may not have been able to attend the conference yesterday, I am Major Jeremy Grunert, one of the organizers of this conference and an assistant professor here at the United States Air Force Academy. It is my distinguished honor to introduce our next panel involving Department of Defense and commercial partnerships. Now, since the earliest days of the US space endeavor, the participation of private and commercial partners has been critical to the United States' operational success. And with the radical expansion of commercial space activities over the past 25 years, this is more true now than ever before. We heard from Brigadier General Endicott this morning that the commercial market is to some extent filling in the gaps to a significant extent in terms of space activities, and that the Department of Defense and the United States government have unique opportunities to work with and leverage private and commercial technologies and partnerships. The forthcoming panel will discuss these issues. Our DoD Commercial Partnerships panel is going to be hosted by Colonel Lynn Silmar. Colonel Silmar is the Staff Judge Advocate for Headquarters Space Operations Command West and Combined Force Space Component Command at Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. Space Operations Command West provides strategic missile warning, nuclear command, control, and communication, position, navigation, and timing, space situational awareness, satellite operations, and range operations. Combined Force Space Component Command is responsible for directing assigned and detached forces in planning, integrating, conducting, and assessing global space operations in order to deliver combat-relevant capabilities to combatant commands, coalition partners, the joint force, and the nation. Colonel Silmar is a graduate of Florida State University and received her commission in 1996. She has served on NAF and MAJCOM staffs and at multiple base level assignments. Colonel Silmar served as a staff judge advocate, a JTF senior legal advisor, and in numerous joint assignments, including at the Joint Functional Component Command for Network Warfare, Headquarters ISAF, United States Forces Afghanistan, and United States Forces Korea. Ma'am, I'm going to turn it over to you and the panel is yours. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you, Jeremy. I'm super excited for this panel discussion because as we look to the future, DoD and commercial partnerships are critical to our mutual success. For the DoD, these partnerships help identify cutting edge technology, expertise, and ideas that expand our capabilities in space. Today, we have an esteemed panel of experts that are going to highlight for us their experiences with DoD commercial partnerships. Our first panelist is Major Eleanor Morgan. Ellie is the Chief Systems Architect at Lockheed Martin for the Commercial Civil Space Advanced Programs Division. Prior to joining Lockheed, Ellie spent 12 years on active duty as an Air Force aviator, piloting both the C-17 and MQ-1. In 2018, she transitioned to the Air Force Reserves, where she continues to serve. Ellie, over to you to kick things off.
Great, thanks, Colonel Silmar, and thanks so much for having me here today. Everyone, really appreciate it, and excited to talk to you about all the fun things that I'm getting to work on, and kind of how this ties in with everything going on with the DoD and these partnerships. So as Colonel Silmar mentioned, I currently work for Lockheed Martin. And my expertise in that area right now is I'm working on a myriad of human spaceflight projects that we're working on. And as many of you know, a lot is happening in the human spaceflight realm as of late. And we're gearing up to get folks back to the moon and the first women on the moon. So we're really excited. Lockheed Martin has a key role in that. We have the Orion spacecraft that will be launching here soon for that as well. So, just to kind of give you guys a background, some of the current projects I'm working on at the moment, I touch on a lot of different things, but some of the ones I've had a key role in have been, the development of surface and orbiting habitats. Also, I'm working on some of the studies we're doing with astronaut radiation countermeasures. That's going to be critically important once we send humans beyond low Earth orbit, where we've been for so many years. A lot of new considerations for that, because we want to keep our astronauts safe as they spend extended time away. And then additionally, some of the really interesting new ones I'm doing is overseeing our development of our mobility systems. So new vehicles, new lunar rovers, just like the Apollo lunar rover, we're kind of making generation 2.0 and a lot of concept development right now. And that also comes with it a lot of unique considerations for the development of that and new challenges as NASA wants to go back to the lunar South Pole and begin our exploration efforts there. And really a lot of the projects right now that I'm working on, the main purpose is that we're really using the moon right now as a test bed, for technologies for the foundation of, future missions, crewed missions to Mars. The moon's a perfect place for us to test this. We're close to Earth. It's a very challenging environment. So we're really excited to start putting some infrastructure up there and getting folks back there to stay for good this time. And one of the other things, as Colonel Silmar mentioned, my background, I spent most of my career actually on active duty Air Force. So it's been really interesting for me to make that transition from being in the DoD to now working for a company, that works with the DoD, as the partner and customer. Prior to my time at Lockheed, I did also spend time at a private company, Bigelow Aerospace, working on developing inflatable space habitats. And that was a really interesting experience as well. So I've been excited to see the gamut here and really have differing perspectives on both sides of this. So, one of the things, how we're partnering with the DoD right now, obviously Lockheed Martin is huge. We have many different projects. We create aircraft for the DoD, as all kinds of things in the military space realm that we do as well. And I would say for some of the human spaceflight projects that I'm involved in, this is a growing area. Obviously, we have the Space Forces starting, and as we begin to look forward towards what will happen on the moon, and we are very interested in partnering with the Space Force, with DoD, to explore those opportunities and what types of projects that we're working on right now in the human spaceflight realm, what can benefit the DoD as well, and maybe it's not for human spaceflight, maybe it's some of the things we work on too is creating plans for a power infrastructure up there, really utilities. If you're going to build out a new neighborhood, that needs to come first. So those are things that we're really looking into now and trying to figure out how we can connect all of this and have a growing economy there. And I would say one of the big things, the big benefits for us, the partnerships, with folks like the DoD, that really does help share the cost of these things. As we all know, human spaceflight is very expensive and challenging, and really no one company can go it alone. So, I think as the old saying goes, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so that's what we are looking to do. We are really looking to partner, find ways that we can align some of our projects to some of the needs of the DoD. We're working on vehicles. Well, is there something, that maybe that could be used in the military side, or the power, or, satellite communications. So really a lot of areas for crossover and collaboration. And on the human spaceflight side, we're really beginning to scratch the surface on that. And one thing I will say has been very helpful in the previous partnerships that we've had with the DoD are very helpful because I leverage them now. And some of the work on mobility vehicles for the moon, we're able to leverage some of the work that's been done by Lockheed previously for the DoD with tactical vehicle development. So it's been really interesting for some of these interdisciplinary projects to see where the crossover lies in some of the previous technology we've done. So I think, as I mentioned, very interdisciplinary projects, so we need to leverage everyone's expertise. And, maybe for some of these, the DoD does have that. And we're very interested to share that, work together, and, get ourselves to the moon and back onto Mars. And so thanks, I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Ellie. Our second speaker is Mr. Ken Hodgkins. Ken is the president of International Space Enterprise Consultants, or ISEC. Prior to forming ISEC, Ken spent 40 years in the federal government working on international space policy, and last serving as the director of the Department of State's Office of Space and Advanced Technology. Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Colonel Silmar. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be part of this panel. I have to say it's probably long overdue, and I just wish you all the best of luck in kind of collating and absorbing all that's gone on for the last few days and have another. Hopefully I can participate again next year. I had the distinct pleasure of working with Troy towards the end of my career. He did a great job. And I had to kind of adjust my presentation based on what Troy and Robert were saying in their earlier presentations. What I want to focus on, and there are a few takeaways that I want you that I want to leave with you. But what I've been advocating in the State Department and today in my work is this need for an international framework that's not, it doesn't have to be binding, it doesn't have to be non-binding necessarily, it doesn't really matter. It's an international framework that's predictable and transparent. And the reason being is that we need civil society to be able to have an impact on what government decision-making is, on the government decision-making process in order to provide the predictability that the commercial sector needs as they put together their business plans. The whole topic here of the DoD and the commercial partnerships, this is important because it's no longer necessarily just DoD to defense ministries. It's going to involve the commercial sector, and internationally we really need to have this, what I call, predictable framework for the emerging space enterprise. So one of the takeaways, you need a cadre in Space Command and the Space Force skilled in diplomacy, civil society, space law, and policy. You need to be totally integrated in the interagency process. And there has to be some ways for DoD writ large to engage with civil society at the domestic as well as the international level. And the other takeaway is something that I'll discuss later on is what can we do with the Five Eyes? And I'll explain a little bit. I'll explain a little bit more about that. So my experience working with DoD has been very fruitful. And one of the areas that we've been able to work on is using the dual technologies for civilian purposes. The first example would be with GPS, where we worked quite closely with the Air Force to create a coordinating group among the US, China, the EU, India, Japan, and Russia to have common civil signals, which now you can receive signals from these countries. It's from these separate systems. It's transparent and it's seamless. And the second area is in the SSA. I have to say, when we were talking about the responsible use of space and the orbital debris problem, DoD played a huge role in dealing with civil society on the SSA and making more and more information available on space situational awareness. And we really reached after the China ASAT test in 2007. It was DoD that stepped forward and said we really need to do something about the problem of orbital debris. I had the pleasure of Ed Fianga and General Helms joining me in the UN on 2 occasions to explain what we're doing with SSA and the need for greater exchange of information among countries, which in turn led to the adoption of the long-term sustainability guidelines in the UN. So I give those examples of where particularly within the interagency, DoD plays a crucial role. And then if we can have the full array of diplomatic tools in front of us to make the case for this transparent, predictable framework within which civil society as well as governments can operate. Now, why do I want to emphasize this? Because there are some basic principles, in my view, that would need to be incorporated in anything that we do, whether it's as Robert and Troy mentioned, maybe we need new instruments. Maybe we need new treaties in future decades. The jury is still out on that. But there has to be some kind of basic principles for what, again, I call this predictable and transparent international framework. Those principles, would be, first we need, on the US side, a common messaging for the future space enterprise. And DoD, again, has to play a crucial role in that, because we are dealing with dual use technologies. DoD has roles to play in many of the things that we do, commercial as well as a civil, enterprise. So some of these basic principles would be the transparency, predictability, creating a level playing field, resiliency, and interoperability. And I say that because the GPS coordination with the other operators of GNSS really hit home the need for resiliency and interoperability for the commercial user of the civil signals. We need a commitment to the free flow of information. Another basic principle has to be the sustainable use of outer space, the responsible use of outer space, and kind of a bottom-up approach in terms of what the commercial sector, what the civil society needs in order to operate within what I would again call this global framework. And then finally, the governance question. It can be in the form of treaties, non-binding agreements, bilateral agreements, and just general understandings among governments as well as the commercial sector. So let me just turn now to kind of the things that I see for the future. And one of the areas that I focused on before leaving the government, I think needs to be carried on, is the fact that we, within the next 10 or 15 years, will have 5 new launching states. It took us decades to get to the eclectic mix of launching states, if you will, today. But New Zealand is already a launching state, taking on roles and responsibilities. And I see there'll be a panelist from New Zealand's probably speaking a little bit about that. Canada has plans for spaceport. The UK, New Zealand, and then obviously the United States, so the Five Eyes. I say this because as launching states, if we have a common understanding with these, we have, I guess, the opportunity to have a common understanding on how to operate in space, what this global framework will be, because the launching states are the key to everything that we do in space. In terms of liability, in terms of compliance with the Outer Space Treaty, everything flows to the launching state. If the launching state set the rules, and in this case, the Five Eyes, set the rules for how do you use these launch vehicles, what are the basic principles when they do launch the payloads of other countries or foreign entities, what would be those rules? And it's much, I liken it to the East India Trading Company, where they had the ships to go from Europe to Asia. And if you didn't want to live by their rules, well, build your own boat. In this case, the launching state has that. It's a huge, huge opportunity right now, because we can set the rules, we can adhere to these basic principles. And the Five Eyes, in my view, it was my view at the State Department, it continues to be my view, is one of the keys, and DoD can play a crucial role in doing that. So I'll leave it at that. I had 10 minutes, I have 10 hours of material, and I won't do that. So thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Ken. Our final presenter is Mr. Jay Icard. Jay was appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of XTAR in March of 2018. Prior to joining XTAR, Jay spent 13 years as a satellite systems integrator, as well as 9 years working on Navy weapons system acquisitions. Jay, over to you.
Thank you, Colonel Silmar. You hear me okay? All right. I want to thank the U.S. Space Command and U.S. Air Force Academy for hosting this conference. It's unique. As someone who participates in many conferences, it's really the subject matter is intriguing, and I'm really happy to be part of it. I also need to thank Ms. Lynn Tatro from the Combined Force Space Component Command for extending me the invite. So I appreciate that. I want to tell you all a little bit about XSTAR, and since it's a law conference, maybe some of the contracting mechanisms that we use might be of interest. I want to refer back to some comments made by General Dickinson and Rear Admiral Bernanke about the use of integrated commercial partners and international partners to get us to where we need to be with our space, DoD space ecosystem and the collaboration. When I tell you about XSTAR, you'll think about how many satellite operators such as XSTAR, we represent that collaboration, not only from working with the DoD, but the international cooperation that occurs as the companies have been formed. Many of the satellite operators have a U.S. Based company, but they also have an international portion of their company that may be that's where the satellites are purchased and built. And there is a DoD facing organization. Many of us in the satellite operator business operate like that. So let me tell you a little bit about XSTAR, and you'll see what I mean. We are a commercial satellite operator. We have two geostationary satellites that operate in X-band. We provide approximately 1.4 gigahertz of capacity. We sell only to the government. So the DoD is our customer. So we do not sell commercially to broadcast industry, only to the government because of the frequency. We have global beams and spot beams. We cover most of the Earth from about Denver to Singapore, and have spot beams in areas of significant DoD activity. Our business is a joint venture between a US-based company, Loral Space, and a Spanish company, Hisdesat. And so the company is majority owned by Loral and minority owned by Hisdesat. The way we operate with the DoD is we operate under a FOCI mitigation, under a special security arrangement where we have outside directors. And so that allows us to participate with a security clearance. And many of the companies that are satellite operators have similar arrangements, or they may operate under a proxy agreement. But so I think there was a comment about yesterday about how do companies with foreign ownership participate in the DoD? Well, this is how we do it, and have been doing it for years. So that's a little bit about XSTAR. To tell you which organizations we work with, maybe I thought I would talk about our contracting mechanisms. We have a number of contract mechanisms where we work directly with a system integrator that is integrating multiple satellite operators, radio frequency, along with ground infrastructure and terminals. So much of our business goes through the satellite or system integrator community. We also have GSA contracts where we have direct orders, and we also have blanket purchase agreements. These are your very traditional contracting mechanisms. Of interest to this organization, which falls into the Space Command, is XSTAR has an active CRADA with the Combined Force Space Component Command for the CSPOC. It's called the Commercial Integration Cell. And this is a contract with 10 similar companies that are satellite operators with space assets, where we jointly participate with the CSPOC in sharing of space situational awareness, intel, and different operations. And if you think about it, it's really a sort of a neat endeavor of trading of information from the US government and information from the operators to sort of help define the direction that we go with the space ecosystem. So I'm personally involved in that, and it's interesting that we use the CRADA as a contracting vehicle. Yesterday, discussion also brought up the use of other transactional authority contract vehicles, which we use as well. Interestingly enough, to this group, XStar actually has an active other transactional contract where we are in the process of demonstrating real world mission roaming from MilSatCom to ComSatCom. I'm going to get more into this roaming topic, but at the completion of this initial portion of the OTA project, we will have a case study of real world roaming during a military mission and how that all worked out. So I'm sure everyone will be interested in that. I think that I want to get to that roaming topic a little bit as we talk about the threat to space. There's been quite a discussion about how you should behave in space, but the threat out there is I think all of us probably think about it a little bit when we go to bed at night. I saw a briefing from Lieutenant General John Shaw about before COVID, and he had made a comparison of space to submarine warfare. And that really hit home for me from my days working with the Navy and anti-submarine warfare, is that you're visually blind, but you're heavily reliant on the sensors and synthesizing the picture of the sensors to inform decision-making and timely action. So if you think about behaviors and the comparison to submarine warfare, there was a time when submarine warfare was thought of as playing dirty, and people sort of made their own rules, and we had to step up our game and to become the top submarine force in the world to control the seas. And the same thing with SATCOM. We've always been there, but as our competitors are closing the gap, we have to do the things to keep that gap there and the advantage. Many of you have had a chance to read General Raymond's Chief of Space Operations Visions for SATCOM. It's an excellent document and really frames the problem well and the direction we need to go. The grave concern from my colleagues that are in the commercial SATCOM community is, if you look at the SATCOM vision, there's a discussion about roaming, being able to go from one constellation to another. And General Raymond will use the analogy of he was in Germany, he took a phone call, he got on a plane, he arrived in Australia, and he was able to pick up and call the same person or receive the same phone call. So I think there is a vision of SATCOM in our arena working the same way. And I'm going to get to why that applies to law in a second. But our commercial SATCOM community is concerned about the threat and an event that creates an urgent and emergent need for ComSatCom to fill the gap. That we may, if we do not do the things at this time and the enabling of it, then we'll fail to enable the roaming. It might be there. Like, my worst nightmare is that I work with the DoD and they say, I need this capacity. And I say, great, it's available. And then, okay, how do we contract for it? Is the ground infrastructure available? Is the security patching all set up? Is the config, that conversation now goes from, well, it's ready, but it's months and months and months. So I think part of our mission from a commercial organization is, how do we work with the DoD and in what legal frameworks will enable that to actually roam from one constellation to another. The one thing about using ComSatCom for resiliency, and as Mr. Hodgkins talked about, resiliency and interoperability, if you think about the DoD's mission and traffic on not only MilSatCom, but also on ComSatCom, the more targets and the less predictable communication path, that causes the enemy to use more resources to disrupt, intercept, or deny our communications. So as a business and as a group of businesses in the commercial SATCOM industry, we are a big supporter of enabling that. Not only does it it brings more business to commercial SATCOM, but we're all patriots too. Those of us that work with the U.S. DoD, we always want to win. That's and win big. We want to ensure that U.S. can maintain its advantage in the conflict. So, I was thinking about the space acquisitions panel yesterday and some of the comments by Mr. Boris, Mr. Haig, Mr. Novella, Mr. Ruane. I think the challenge for us, and that's the collective us, the Space Command, the legal community, is how do we thread the needle? How do we get the law and policy and acquisition to accelerate the capability of the mission? Go back to that problem set that I mentioned about roaming. How do we set up contractual mechanisms that enable roaming from MILSATCOM to COMSATCOM? How do the mechanisms exist to configure ground infrastructure so that in the event that services are needed from my company and my colleagues' companies, that there is simply a repoint of an antenna, and the kill chain, the speed of the kill chain is reduced into minutes. So I think that's, I just, when I was listening yesterday, I just thought about, we have to figure out a way to thread the needle. So as I mentioned, that XStar has been working on a OTA to create a case study of actually how we've done that. And we've started a stopwatch. And it's going to be an interesting analysis to look at why did it take so long to make this decision? Why did what happened in those cases? Not to cast blame, but to continue to shrink that timeline for those mechanisms. So we're really interested in the outcome of that. I think it will provide great value to the DoD. To continue to embrace industry in the problem solving, much as they're doing with the CIC, and establish those real projects that enable the operations where we must be able to perform in a contested, degraded, or operationally degraded environment. So that's sort of a little bit of XStar 101, some of the things that we've been working on in a fire hose scenario. And I thank you again, Colonel Silmar. And if you all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great comments by all. And I think that one of the common threads that kind of went through each of your briefings was that, at least one of the things that I pulled out, was the idea that commercial industry can help influence and move things towards, or move the policy, even if not from a legalistic standpoint, but from a consensus of the population, that you can influence people into a particular actions. Do you guys have, or would you be willing to share your thoughts on how commercial industry can help to influence other spacefaring nations to really adopt some ideas of responsible behaviors?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you, Colonel Silmar, for that observation, because that is at the heart of what I've been advocating. I use the word civil society, not commercial, because civil society is much broader than that. And it's stakeholders that know that they use space. It's stakeholders that use space but don't necessarily know it. This whole issue of this international framework of influencing how other governments regulate their commercial enterprises is hugely important. One of the things that I've also advocated is this need to understand how other governments, under the authority of the Outer Space Treaty, I think it's Article 6 on authorization and supervision, how do they treat their commercial entities? Do our commercial folks, when they do want to have transnational ventures, are they going to be treated the same way that other commercial entities treated within that government. How do we make other countries more predictable and transparent? And again, it comes right back. The commercial partnerships that DoD could be seeking, could be with obviously with foreign entities, and that's why there's a shared benefit, in my view, for DoD to be part of this open framework, and to be an advocate for that, and to have our commercial and our civil society also be an advocate for that internationally, whether it's through direct contact or through the UN or through other bodies, as I mentioned, maybe the Five Eyes. But thank you.
Great, thanks, Ken. I saw several questions pop up here in the Q&A. One of them is from Matthew King, and he identifies that as the US government speaks more openly about military use and potential weaponization of space, and it's not only about human achievement and exploration, do you see any of the commercial space industry resistance to wanting to do business with DoD? Jake, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, my business is all about the DoD, so yeah, we want to. But to answer the question, I think you can look at the investment that my colleagues at Intelsat, SES, Eutelsat, Iridium, all those companies have an infrastructure already set up to support the DoD. They have a DoD facing organization. They have DoD facing or DoD compliant ground infrastructures. So I think there's a great desire for satellite communications operators to do so. I think one of the desires is Mr. Hodgkins made a point about this is to have it be a little bit more predictable. To design a business around the fact that there might be a war somewhere is not a great business model. So I think that's one of the friction points with the commercial SATCOM industry is how do we have some predictability so that the DoD's needs are somewhat defined. It doesn't have to be exactly defined, but we're all working with our international parts of our company to define what the next spacecraft should look like and what requirements should be on that and the requirements of the ground infrastructure. So try to allow us to make more informed decisions about our capital investments, I think, is a big step that we need to take. But I think across the board, the commercial SATCOM operators are very interested in doing business with the DoD.
Yeah, but I guess the question is really, do you think that because DoD is speaking out in the idea of space being a warfighting domain more, that it might make companies like yours or others who have to deal with international partners more hesitant to deal with DoD because of that particular ideology? Over.
I'm sorry. I don't think so, because I think they have been in that environment for some time. I don't think there would be a hesitancy, but in times of conflict, depending on the structure of your company and what other services they provide, it could put you in a quandary situation. But I think the companies are set up to handle that and have the governance structures to deal with that.
I might just piggyback a little bit on that. Yeah, great words, Jay. I think a lot of it may just depend on the company, the size of the company. I think the question had said, it might not be an issue for companies that already do a lot of business with the DoD. I think that's probably an accurate assessment. And usually within those companies, you have many different divisions. There's a specific division that deals directly, on the military space side of things, at least at Lockheed. And so a lot of that may come down to the folks in charge of that company. And to be honest, I mean, maybe it comes down to how far are they willing to go to push their product forward. You know, if that's an ethical issue for them, you know, and they have other sources of funding, then maybe they would back away from it, you know. And who knows if they're doing what their other efforts are, you know, within their company. Yeah, if they are collaborating with international partners, you know, because some of these startup companies here in the U.S. they have international backers from countries that we might be in conflict with. So, you know, I would see it being kind of touchy for certain companies, depending on their size and where they're at in their, you know. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, it's probably very similar to being in the military. I'm sure that anyone would be given the choice, at least I would think, you know, hey, if this is a problem, do you want to work in if there's a different division of the company? Or, you know, I would think that that is a good talk to have, you know, at a company like that. You know?
Could I just add one thing as well? These are great comments, and it's a great question. So at a political level, this is my experience. My experience is that companies want to work they want to make money, and it doesn't particularly matter whom they're making money with or from. It's the governments that are the problem, and that's the gist of this question. It's the governments that is the political level. So when I mentioned General Helms and Ed Fianga going out to the UN twice, that was the first time anybody from DoD addressed this committee. It's a political committee, and what it did in terms of our ability to come up with these guidelines on long-term sustainability, in the face of that actually was a DoD representative during the course of the negotiations, is build confidence. It is more of a confidence and transparency exercise where the political level, they go, hey, these DoD guys, they aren't so bad. And that's why I came back to this whole question of a cadre of people experienced in diplomacy, civil society, space law and policy, in Space Command, in Space Force, because as we're speaking more about the military uses of space, we can also flip it over and say, yeah, but DoD has certain value added to the overall the overall space enterprise and can benefit civil society.
Yeah, I think just like, you know, just like NASA talks about the spinoffs that have benefited society, same thing, yeah, through the money that DoD spent in many of this area. So yeah, you know, I think sometimes people kind of mistake it as all doom and gloom and these terrible things that are spinoffs from the military. But I mean, gosh, you know, GPS, I mean, all of these things we take for granted, you know, that's all been wonderful outcomes from these partnerships.
Yeah, and I think this has actually spurred a lot of discussion in the Q&A, and have a kind of a follow-on question from Brian Green. And it says, in light of the risk of commercial space systems being targeted in war, are commercial space operators consider building defensive technologies into their satellites? So is that still something that you guys weigh in your commercial decisions?
Well, I would say I'm sure that it is. It's a slightly different division than where I work in, but you know, any satellite that's getting launched, you know, there's many things that go into hardening it. Yeah, from things of that nature to, you know, just environmental hardening and other contingencies that need to be considered. So, I mean, yes, I would say that's definitely a risk that would be included.
Yeah, I'll just add on to what Eleanor said, the EMP kind of hardening, geolocation of EMI kind of things, but nothing as fancy as torpedo countermeasures. But those kind of things to allow us to isolate the issues. You know, EMI is a continual issue in our business.
Yeah, Mr. Eichhardt, another question came in directly to you that says, as a company that works with DoD and SpaceCom, what do you think is or should be the DoD's obligation to protect U.S. commercial space industry assets from adversaries? Is it a contractual matter, or do you think it's more of a moral obligation? Or is there an instance in which case you would not necessarily want DoD to defend your assets?
So I'll answer the last question first, and I'll answer it as a representative of the industry, not just a representative of XStar. I think that is it depends. I think there are cases, especially my colleagues that have global fleet operations on their satellite fleets. They may not want an intervention. That would be, a corporate governance kind of call. The first part of the question, I think contractually, I think it's almost like, would the U.S. want to protect a transatlantic cable? That's a communication path. Yeah, I think so. Does it have to be contractually? I don't know that it needs to be contractually. I think it's in everyone's interest. It's like an obvious interest, as opposed to the DoD having to write its ensuring this in a contract. So I think it can go without being in a contract. It's just a general interest issue. Hopefully I answered the question.
Could I add one thing on this as well? It's an interesting question, and we looked at it extensively. And the issue is that with DoD using so many commercial assets to fulfill their mission, would an attack on a commercial satellite kick in a response as a governmental matter? That is, if we have reason to believe someone took down a commercial satellite as a matter of law or policy, would we consider that to be a hostile act that would need to be responded to? That's something I'm sure the lawyers are looking at, but it's so much different than it was 50 years ago when commercial wasn't quite as prevalent.
Awesome, thanks. This question is from Michael Goodman, and it came to you, Ellie, and it says, is human interplanetary travel realistic at the present, given the many obstacles that are still present?
Yeah, great question. $1 million question. We all want to go to Mars right now, or yesterday. Yeah, I think we're on a good path to get there right now. Are we ready to go there right now? Personally, I don't think so. Obviously we weigh out risk, especially when it comes to human spaceflight missions. That's a huge thing. And that's something that NASA's looking at right now. As we go forth to Mars and we do things we haven't done before, how much risk are we willing to take? We took a lot back in the day when we first launched people to space, but we've been pretty risk adverse over the years, staying in LEO. So, there's a lot, I would say the areas that we are focusing on as an industry and NASA's looking into right now, are the technologies that will get us there. There is funding that's going into nuclear thermal propulsion right now. We're looking into, radiation countermeasures for astronauts. We're looking into, obviously larger rockets that can get folks there, different types of trajectories that might have, shorter time periods. A lot of different things, in situ resource utilization. Can we create fuel for a return trip back? So a lot of things that folks are working on right now. They're working on solutions to that. So I do think that is something, in the near term that we could get to Mars. Can we do it right now at this instant? Probably not, or not very safely. You could probably do a one-way trip for sure. But yeah, great question, thanks.
Okay, this final question, because it looks like I'm kind of coming up on the end of our time here, is really to all the participants, and it comes from Eric Springs, and it says, to the extent that it hasn't already been covered, do the commercial providers have an opinion on how to best address the harmful interference activities from adversaries within the context of the ITU and the OST?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. In the prior panel, I think Robert made reference to Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty concerning the harmful interference. This has always been a quandary for us. Again, I've left the government, so I don't have any disclaimers about any, I can say anything I want. The issue is, what is harmful interference? And there's no definition for it. And I can say that there was always a reluctance on our part to define it or to invoke that particular article, because what that would do then is kind of, what would be the word, stimulate others to invoke that concerning our activities. So for example, Robert was talking about the ASAT tests that the Chinese and that and then the Russians conducted, although it didn't create long-lived debris. Is just the fact that you leave stuff in space or during a launch operation, is that harmful harmful interference or harmful contamination? So it really is a matter of what we want to do if we were to use these kinds of things. In the ITU, there's very specific protocols. I'm not an ITU expert, but yes, there is something very specific there. But in the Outer Space Treaty, it remains a question up in the air, and there are consequences if we were to use the Outer Space Treaty for the purposes of confronting another country for harmful interference.
Great, thanks. I'm really sorry I wasn't able to get to everybody's question. My understanding is that during the breakout sessions, they'll have a bit of an opportunity to do more of an extended Q&A at that time. And hopefully you guys will be able to get to discuss all of these very interesting and thought-stimulating topics. So with that, back over to you, Jeremy.
Great, thank you so much, ma'am. We do just have a couple final minutes in your guys' panel. Could we just get maybe a final word from each of the panelists? Or it's okay if...
Well, sure, I'm always...
I can go.
I will, I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eleanor.
Oh, no, it's fine. I was just going to say, yeah, thanks so much for having me here today. And, I think maybe my main takeaway is just to let folks know on the DoD side, if there's something you need help with, the commercial industry, we're happy to help. We just need to know, reach out to us, let us know. And a lot of times we don't know what we don't know sometimes. And if there's something that we're doing in parallel that aligns with your need, we're more than happy. We can do more things, obviously with more money, but we're happy to leverage a lot of work that we might be doing on the commercial civil space side, things for NASA. There's a lot of that stuff that can be modified, and we can work off of that. And having a wider customer base for us, that means that we can do more things faster. So thanks.
Well, I just wanted to close by thanking again the Air Force Academy for having me as part of this really great panel and part of the really great conference. I'm on LinkedIn for those of you who want to get in touch with me. It has all my contact information. I will say one other thing. I do have now a project on civil society in the future space enterprise. And you can see that it's going to be a sustained platform to discuss the issues that I've already raised here. And it will be at the Hague Institute for Global Justice. So you can go to the Hague Institute for Global Justice.org or contact me. And again, thank you all very, very much.
Thanks. I just echo my colleagues. Thanks to everyone. This conference, this panel, some of the questions and discussion, they sort of make my head hurt a little bit. But I think I need to go back and watch all the episodes of Star Trek and see how the Federation laws apply. But we are setting the course of the future here, and it's really neat to be a part of it. And this is an excellent conference. I'm really happy to participate. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you again to all of our distinguished panelists. And Colonel Silmar, ma'am, thank you so much for moderating this panel. We really appreciate your time, ma'am, and we are really glad that you were all able to participate in this event.